created a secret email server and put it in her home, preferably in the bathroom, to hide a pay-for-play scheme, and then trying to destroy it when subpoenaed. I'm not going to talk about Ivanka Trump and her emails until somebody shows me that what she did got anywhere even close to what Hillary Clinton did.
All right, checkmate, Rush. All right, that's all the time we have. We'll always be fair and balanced. Let not your heart be troubled. Governor Mike Huckabee is filling in for Laura. You did a great job last week. It's great to see you, Governor, and it's always good to see you.
Well, thank you, Sean. Have a great Thanksgiving. It's a pleasure to be here for Laura, and you and your family have a great time.
Here's the thing. Remember the media was questioning whether Sarah, your daughter, makes pies? I know for a fact she does. As a matter of fact, I wish I was at your house eating them on Thanksgiving.
I can attest to the fact that she makes them, and they are fantastic. It is a typical Southern woman's pie. But let me tell you something. Never, ever question the authenticity of a Southern woman's pie. That's going to get you in trouble.
By the way, who would want that job? But she does an amazing job every day. We're always glad to see you. Thank you, Governor. Have a great show tonight.
Thank you very much. And good evening, everyone. I'm Mike Huckabee. I'm in for Laura Ingraham tonight, and this is the Ingraham Angle. A big show for you tonight. At the White House press corps, the war that is having with the Trump administration might just backfire. In a moment, we're going to explain how two recent decisions point to a new reality for the media. Plus, the president under siege from critics over his response to the Saudi Arabian killing of Jamal Khashoggi. An all-star foreign policy panel will tell us why, despite his critics, Trump had no choice. But first,
the written answers to the witch hunt that's been going on forever. No collusion, no nothing. They've been finished. Finished them yesterday. The lawyers have them. I assume they'll turn them in today or soon.
Well, shortly after the president delivered that statement on his way to Mar-a-Lago, it was indeed confirmed that the president and his attorneys officially responded to special counsel Robert Mueller's team. The president's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, adding, and I quote, "It's been our position from the outset that much of what's been asked raised serious constitutional issues and was beyond the scope of a legitimate inquiry. This remains our position today," end quote. So is this probe now finally on its last legs? For more on what the White House is thinking tonight, we go live to Kevin Corke, who's traveling with the president in Palm Beach. Kevin, I know you're suffering down there in Palm Beach. Tell us what's up.
Yeah, what are you going to do about it, Governor? Hey, great to be with you and wonderful to have you on the program. Happy Thanksgiving to you and certainly your family. I can just tell you this. The White House remains resolute and determined that this probe is going to end one way or the other, sooner preferably than later. I can also tell you that they continue to insist that there was never, ever any Russian collusion. And we've talked about that at length. And so the obvious question becomes now, what happens as we move into the next phase with this special counsel? The ball is clearly in Robert Mueller's court. And there, frankly, Governor, are a number of different directions he could choose to go in, because despite the White House's frustration, this probe will continue until it reaches a natural end or the acting AG puts the brakes on it. So the question becomes, where do we go from here? Well, the Mueller team could review the president's answers that you just talked about, and they could simply ask for more information. They could review those answers again and then prepare to simply disclose the report that we all figure is just about wrapped up. They could, meanwhile, compare his answers with other respondents, and that's where things can get a little interesting, if not thorny. And then ultimately, the nuclear option, they could choose to subpoena the president of the United States. Now, let's be clear about this, Governor. Sources tell Fox News that while the president's legal team remains open, and I'm using air quotes, to a possible sit-down with the special counsel, no one, repeat, no one believes that will happen without a subpoena. And even if it were to happen, I don't think there's any question it would spark a constitutional crisis, something we'll be keeping a very close eye on. But for now, enjoy the holiday week. Mike, back to you.
Thanks, Kevin, and you enjoy your Thanksgiving as well, even in Palm Beach. Well, here with more, Attorney John Sale. He served as special assistant counsel at the Watergate trial. He was under Archibald Cox and Leon Jaworski. Also with me, Juan Williams, Fox News political analyst and co-host of The Five, and Dan Bongino, former Secret Service agent and host on NRA TV. John, I want to start with you. We've got these answers now. They've been submitted. Is there a timeline that you can sort of give us a insight into?
Well, nobody has a timeline, but I think let's put it in context. I don't think, and I argued in an article I wrote in The Hill, I don't think that the special counsel is entitled to any answers from a person they're investigating. I mean, I represent people all the time who are being investigated. We never give a statement, and prosecutors do their job. They continue a thorough investigation. They draw their conclusions without the benefit of answers from the person they're investigating. I think they're getting more than they ordinarily would. And in this case, they can write a report. The Office of Legal Counsel has said they cannot indict the president. So after over a year, after over 1 million documents, after I think it's 35 witnesses where the president did not assert any privilege, isn't it time for them to write their report and let the court of public opinion decide whether or not there was collusion?
Okay, so Juan, do you want to give me the contrarian opinion as to why this ought to just keep going on and on and on like the Energizer Bunny, for heaven's sakes?
No, Mike, I'm all for wrapping it up. Obviously, this is not of the length that we saw in terms of prior prosecutors investigating presidents. Those go on for 5 years or more. So we're coming up on 2 years here. And so I don't think that's a reason, although I would prefer, given that we're going to see a lot of, excitement around the 2020 election, that somehow this get out of the way. I'd prefer that. I will say that I was taken aback by the effort by Rudy Giuliani, the president's lawyer, to limit the scope of the investigation by saying we're not going to answer any questions about obstruction. Now, I heard, what was being said about, hey, you don't have to answer anything. That's fine. But the president has long said he has nothing to hide. And then the later issue is that the New York Times today broke a story saying the president was suggesting to the White House counsel that somehow the Department of Justice go after Jim Comey, go after Hillary Clinton. In other words, punish his political opponents. Boy, that sure seems shady. That sure seems like obstruction. I don't know anything about what's in the Mueller report, obviously. I don't know about collusion. I don't have any evidence of that in front of me. But boy, that sure strikes me as a man who's trying to obstruct an investigation because he worries that he's in deep water.
Yeah, Dan, if that happened, that would, my gosh, it would be almost as bad as when Obama went after people through the IRS and the Justice Department, and when he had wiretaps on James Rosen and his parents and the Associated Press. And to Juan's point about the limitation of the investigation, let's talk about that a minute. Because as I recall, the only thing that was supposed to be investigated was whether or not Donald Trump colluded with Russia. That was the limitation of the investigation. This thing has continued to go on and on. Dan, I'd like for you to weigh in and tell me, if that's the limitation, isn't this about over?
Well, I always enjoy the company of my good friend Juan and you, Governor. But Juan, I don't know how you said that with a straight face. Are you seriously making the case that targeting your political opponents, which was in that New York Times story, is all of a sudden this malicious thing, while simultaneously we know the Trump team was spied on by the Obama administration? Juan, that's not in dispute.
That? Wait a minute. What's that about? We know that, in fact, when Trump said there was a wiretap on Trump Tower, everybody said that's not true.
Well, Juan, do you know the name Stefan Halper? He was a Central Intelligence Agency intelligence asset that was utilized against the Trump team. You know how I know that, Juan? Because he actually emailed people in the Trump team. The emails, I don't know if you missed that, but that's out there. That was a story. He was outed in the New York Times where they said everything but his name. So I just find it bizarre that you would say, oh, my gosh, this is so offensive. Trump's alleged to have targeted his political opponents, as you completely ignore the fact that the Obama administration actually did target their political opponents. That's not open for dispute. That actually happened.
But Dan, hold on. I think what you're saying is that when there was the Obama administration knew of Russia interfering in 2016, and they may have approved somebody saying, hey, what's going on here? but that's not punishing your political opponents as someone in office acting like an authoritarian, like
Juan,
a czar,
they did
and,
not know
and instructing
Juan.
the instruments of criminal justice to go after your political opponents.
Juan, listen. Again, I'm sorry, but you're just not familiar with the details of the case. The deputy director of the FBI himself, Juan, said there would have been no Russian collusion case without the dossier. The dossier has been debunked. None
That's
of it.
not true.
This is nonsense, Juan.
Hey, gentlemen,
That's not
I'm
What
going
do
to
you
have
mean
to
it's
jump
not
in.
true?
But let
I'm
me just
enjoying
quickly
this
say-
immensely, Juan and Dan. I have enjoyed this immensely, but I want to thank you and John all for being here. But I've got to let you go. Get your turkey cooked. In the
Well, have a
meantime,
great
panel,
evening.
thank you. I'm going to turn now to the ongoing battle between CNN and the White House. CNN celebrated their legal victory when Jim Acosta got his press pass reinstated. But what does it mean for everybody else? Byron York, writing yesterday, said, and I quote, the Acosta decision could make it easier for White House officials to kick reporters out, end quote. Joining me now to discuss is former White House press secretary and senior advisor to the America First Action PAC, Sean Spicer, along with former Ronald Reagan aide and author of the forthcoming book, Swamp Wars, Jeffrey Lord. All right, gentlemen, let's talk about the new rules the White House has laid out for reporters. Actually, will they be followed by Acosta and his colleagues in the press room? Or is the White House going to need to come up with a maybe 3 strikes and you're out plan? Sean, your view on this this new announcement of the White House?
Well, Governor, it's great to see you. I think I talked about this in my podcast with Kellyanne Conway. This is a discussion about content versus conduct. And I think there's a very capable press secretary that's right now able to discern the difference between the two. No one has a question about the content of any reporter's question. They can ask whatever they want. But their conduct is what's in question. And I think that's what the judge ruled the other day. Will they behave in a way that's professional? Will they respect not just the office of the presidency, but their fellow reporters? And I think that's what this really comes down to. I think there's a great press secretary now. You may know her, that knows how to call balls and strikes. And there's a president that knows how to understand that as well. And I think this is what it comes down to. And where other organizations, no names mentioned, but you may guess them, are trying to blur the lines is the question about what the content is. No one cares what the reporter asks. They can ask whatever question they want. But the way that these reporters conduct themselves, do they conduct themselves and show respect to not only the fellow reporters, but to the President of the United States and the White House is what's in question.
Jeffrey, the judge ruled in a rather narrow way. He did not say that the First Amendment was in any way being attacked by Jim Acosta losing his hard pass. It was just that the process was not fully maybe visible to the world, and therefore his Fifth Amendment issue was the only one. But they celebrated as if somehow that they had taken a stand for democracy. I don't remember any of the mainstream media being really that clever, clear, and honest about what that ruling was from the judge last week.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Governor. And Sean has hit the nail on the head. This is about conduct, not about content. You know, in the last couple days, we've heard from Major Garrett now with CBS. In the Obama days, of course, he was the White House correspondent for Fox. No one remembers Major Garrett acting like Jim Acosta. It's because he didn't. There is a way to do this. Sean has been the White House press secretary. I've been a press secretary to a senator and a congressman before that. This is totally unprofessional stuff. And I think that CNN has to be very careful here of what they wish for. Because now, if there are going to be a set of rules and regulations, then the good press secretary that Sarah is, she's going to have to, and she will, I have no doubt, call them out. You know, one other thing, I took a quick look back at a memory from childhood of JFK's press conferences where he had adversarial reporters. They were so well-mannered, Governor. It's beyond belief. We have gone so far down the path in the wrong direction with this stuff. And it's almost unbelievable. And I think CNN and Jim Acosta will come to regret it. So will their compadres in the room.
I want to get your thoughts on the fact that the White House Correspondents Association have announced that it's not going to have a comedian roast the media next year at what's known as the annual Nerd Prom. Instead, they're going to have biographer Ron Chernow, who's going to be the featured speaker, to put some perspective on today's politics and history. Last year's speaker, anti-Trump comedian Michelle Wolf, tweeted this in response. She said, and I quote, "The White House Correspondents Association are cowards. The media is complicit, and I couldn't be prouder," end quote. First of all, I'm not sure they had a comedian last year. They had Michelle Wolf, and she just wasn't funny. So, Sean, what's your response to the fact that Correspondents Association, for the first time in decades, has decided that they're not going to have that kind of lack of political humor going on?
You know what? Here's my response. I applaud Olivia Knox and the White House Correspondents Association for doing this. They want to have a dinner that celebrates the First Amendment, and it actually shows that that's what their intent is. So I applaud them for it, because they last year they wanted to have a comedian, and they talked about how this comedian, Michelle Wolf, would conduct herself and talk about the First Amendment, and it wasn't. It was rude. It was disgusting. And I think for them to at least acknowledge the fact that they want to talk about the First Amendment and have a historian do it, I don't know what this individual is going to talk about, but I think at least their intent is right. And I'll give them credit for that, because last year's dinner was disgusting. And what I thought was more appalling about the dinner than anything is that they branded it as about the First Amendment. The comedian, if that's what you call her, wasn't that. And no one in the White House correspondence from NBC, ABC, CBS, CNN said anything about the way that this person, so-called, conducted themselves in the, quote, spirit of the First Amendment. So to see them at least acknowledge that that wasn't the right direction is at least something that I want to applaud and say, at least you got the message.
Well, we'll see how it works out. Jeffrey, Sean, great to have you both. Happy Thanksgiving to you.
Thanks, Governor.
Happy Thanksgiving,
Thanks, Sean.
Governor.
Happy Thanksgiving.
You bet. Straight ahead, Trump's critics are lashing out over his response to Saudi Arabia today in the wake of the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Up next, our panel, they'll explain why he might have signed
with Saudi Arabia. And by the way, just so everybody, I have no business whatsoever with Saudi Arabia. It's all about, for me, very simple. It's America first. Saudi Arabia, if we broke with them, I think your oil prices would go through the roof. I've kept them down. It's a very simple equation for me. I'm about make America great again, and I'm about America first.
Well, that was the president earlier today addressing his decision not to further punish Saudi Arabia after the killing of Jamal Khashoggi. For more on what the White House and the critics are saying tonight, let's go to Kristen Fisher. She's live from Washington. Kristen?
Well, President Trump says that there will be no further repercussions against Saudi Arabia because he believes a good U.S.-Saudi relationship is simply more important. He's putting business opportunities and security alliances over this human rights abuse, the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Now, the decision comes despite a report that the CIA believes that the Saudi crown prince did order the killing. But President Trump said today that he's standing by the Saudis, and here's why.
And I'm not going to tell a country that's spending hundreds of billions of dollars and has helped me do one thing very importantly, keep oil prices down so that they're not going to $100 and $150 a barrel. I'm not going to destroy the world economy, and I'm not going to destroy the economy for our country by being foolish with Saudi Arabia.
But the president's decision is being denounced by members of both parties on Capitol Hill, even by some of his closest allies. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham said, "I fully realize we have to deal with bad actors and imperfect situations on the international stage. However, when we lose our moral voice, we lose our strongest asset." And Senator Rand Paul said, "I'm pretty sure this statement is Saudi Arabia first, not America first." Now, in that statement, President Trump said to Congress that Congress was free to go in a different direction if it so choose. And indeed, tonight, Senator Graham said that he believes that there will be strong bipartisan support for serious sanctions against Saudi Arabia. Mike.
Thank you, Kristen. Joining me now with reaction is Waleed Faris, the foreign policy advisor to Donald Trump's 2016 campaign, David Tafuri, former Obama campaign foreign policy advisor and former State Department official, as well as Rebecca Heinrichs, senior fellow at the Hudson Institute. Waleed, let's talk about this good or bad move on the president's part.
I think the president is basically tell us that the national security, the high interests of the United States, basically tells us that we need to maintain the strategic relationship with Saudi Arabia. But at the same time, there need to be an investigation. And I think if you want to be fair in America and around the world, that investigation should be comprehensive. all the way if there are other crimes. We've heard that before. So I think, on the one hand, maintaining the strategic relationship with the Saudis to contain the Iranians, to make sure that we are continuing the fight against the jihadists and ISIS, is the right thing to do, and the investigation should be separate from politics and go all the way.
Rebecca, it does seem, though, that this can't just be a binary choice. It's either the Saudis or the Iranians. If somebody does something bad, even if they're our friends, don't we need to do something to say that this has got to be seriously dealt with? And the systematic murder of a journalist, that's pretty serious.
Mike, I think that the president actually is being prudent here. It's not a binary choice, as you said, but we have sanctioned the 17 Saudis that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has identified as responsible for Khashoggi's murder. But the president has decided that we have to look at the context that this falls in, and that's the security relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia. There are a couple of major things we got to keep in mind. Saudi Arabia is critically important for the global energy market. Even as the United States becomes energy independent, our allies still rely on the petroleum that comes from Saudi Arabia. And especially as we sanction Iran, we need that oil to keep flowing from Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia also helps us keep those energy choke points open, and so that the Iranians don't have a monopoly on those, including the Strait of Hormuz. And then, of course, they're helping the United States in pushing back Iranian aggression generally in the region. So that's a critical relationship. And so I think that the president really thread the needle carefully in balancing the human rights concerns of Khashoggi's murder and also taking into consideration, first and foremost, the priority, which is the security of Americans.
David, President Trump's not the first president that's had a cozy relationship with the Saudis. To my knowledge, all of the presidents, Democrats and Republicans, have sometimes, I think, been too cozy with the Saudis, even after 9/11, when we really didn't call their hand. After the reality was that they were highly connected to the folks who were guilty of 9/11. So is President Trump any different than the other presidents, Democrat and Republican, who have kind of looked the other way at the atrocities of the Saudis?
Well, that's a fair criticism against all of our presidents, but this was a serious provocation. The world is watching to see what America is going to do. And what America needs to do is two things. We have to send a message to the world that we won't tolerate this kind of behavior, and there will be repercussions for it. At the same time, we have to preserve our alliance with Saudi Arabia because it is an important ally. So we have to punish them, make them say they're sorry, make them do the things that show they're never going to do this again, so other countries also don't do it, but also preserve that alliance. That's important. Now, President Trump was doing an okay job of that, but it went off the rails today with his public statements. You saw some of them in the previous reporting. He also put out a written statement. It looks like he wrote it himself. It starts out saying that the world is a dangerous place. That's not an appropriate way to start a foreign policy statement. It sounds like he's saying he can't protect us from the types of thugs that Saudi Arabia sent to kill this journalist Khashoggi. That's not appropriate. American values are not for sale. You heard Trump talking about how it's more important that we be able to sell arms to Saudi Arabia than that we stand up for rule of law, that we stand up for human rights. That's not right. He needs to go back to the original tact, which is we're going to punish Saudi Arabia, but we're going to preserve our relationship with the king, but we're going to encourage them to make sure everyone who's responsible, no matter how high it goes up, everyone who is responsible is punished.
I need some quick answers from each of you. Let me start, Waleed, with you. What are the president's options? What should he do? If you were whispering in his ear tonight, what would you tell him he's got to do?
It's very simple. On the one hand, continue with these investigations. We've had investigations in the past, like with the killing of the former Prime Minister of Lebanon, Hariri, that are 13 years for now. So we have to be very serious about these investigations. On the one hand, the sanctions should target those who are responsible and not engage in geopolitical mistakes by engaging more influence of Iran in Yemen or in other parts of the region. So we have to be very careful and distinguishing between the legal process and the geopolitical process.
Rebecca, very quickly, just a simple answer. Does this hurt the president with members of his own party?
I don't think that it should. I think that the president's being completely realistic with the cards that he's been dealt. He should continue to pressure the Saudis privately, and we should continue to hope and to push the young prince, to move towards reforms. He's shown an interest in having a softening relationship with Israel. That's a critical ally. We need to continue to cultivate that relationship and pressure where we can so that it's useful.
And David, does this send a good or bad message to the Iranians?
Well, the Iranians like this, right? They want to see a division between Saudi Arabia and the U.S. So we have to show we are going to keep that alliance in place, and we are going to continue to confront Iran, but we're going to curb this kind of conduct by Saudi Arabia. Let's see what our CIA says about who is responsible. The president should work with our intelligence agencies and with Congress to come up with a resolution that's going to punish Saudi Arabia but preserve the alliance.
Thank you all. David, Waleed, Rebecca, have a great Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
And coming up, should a small handful of leftist judges be making decisions that adversely affect all of America? Now, wait till you hear how an Obama-appointed judge just upended the president's emergency restrictions on asylum claims. That debate coming up next.
People should not be allowed to immediately run to this very friendly circuit and file their case, because you cannot win if you're us a case in the Ninth Circuit. And I think it's a disgrace. This was an Obama judge. And I'll tell you what, it's not going to happen like this anymore.
Well, that was President Trump taking aim at the liberal Ninth Circuit and one judge in particular, U.S. District Judge John S. Tiger, who was nominated by President Obama back in 2012. Judge Tiger issued a nationwide injunction against Trump's newly announced emergency restrictions on asylum claims. This means anyone seeking asylum can do it anywhere they want. That's instead of the ports of entry that the Trump administration sought to restrict it to. The debate, this topic is Francisco Hernandez, immigration attorney, and Art Arthur from the Center for Immigration Studies. Art, let's start with you. This is basically saying, oh, come on in any way that you can. I mean, that seems a little dangerous to sort of change the rules of how people seeking asylum get into the country.
Well, and it's the danger that Judge Tiger actually ignores. And in fact, he seems to be completely unaware of the dangers that exist for people who enter the United States illegally. 68% of all of those individuals are assaulted during that trip. 1/3 of all women are sexually assaulted during the trip through Mexico to the United States to enter illegally. What the Trump administration is attempting to do is dissuade individuals from entering the United States illegally, to have an orderly process by which individuals go to ports of entry. And yet, for some reason, Judge Tiger has said that individuals who are entering the United States illegally have some right to enter the United States illegally, or at least that the Trump administration hasn't acted properly in constraining them from doing so.
No, it's absolutely incorrect. It's not true. It happens to be the law. If he doesn't like it, why didn't he get Congress to do the immigration reform he's promised for 2 years? It happens to be the law.
Francisco,
excuse me, let me interrupt you a moment.
know that it's not the law.
Hold on, guys. Hold on. If it's the law, then isn't it the law that you have to go through a port of entry? Isn't it the law that if you want to go into a country, that there are processes to legally immigrate? And Francisco, I believe that there ought to be a legal immigration policy. I'm for immigration. I'm not against it. I'm even for asylum for people who are truly endangered. But this is not what we're talking about. We're talking about people just showing up. So how do you respond to that?
Well, because they still have to make a claim, pass the threshold burden of proof to show that they have at least the opportunity for political asylum. And the people making the evaluation of whether they have shown that proof are employees of the State Department. It doesn't mean they get political asylum because they cross in a legal port of entry or a non-legal port of entry. It doesn't matter. The proof is the same, and the people evaluating are employees of President Trump. So it doesn't make a difference. Where they cross, they still have to show up.
They don't, but they don't have a right. They have a right to apply for asylum, but they don't have eligibility for asylum. And what the Trump administration attempted to do was restrict the ability of individuals who have entered the United States illegally in violation of U.S. law, who have committed a crime, from applying for asylum. They don't have
They can't come through legally through a port of entry anyway. It doesn't matter if they line up at the port of entry. They're not going to be let in anyway until they're heard on their political asylum claim. By the way, why don't we just
Absolutely, but if they show up at the port of entry, then we can allow them to enter in an orderly fashion. We don't have them hiring smugglers. We don't have them hiring the cartels to enter the United States legally. Yes, there might be metering. We might be limiting the number of people who come.
How do you think
they got here by passing through Mexico?
Francisco, let me weigh in here, Francisco.
Sure, Governor.
Let me ask you this. If a person shows up, you say it doesn't have to be a point of entry, just anywhere, and they say, I need asylum. So if that's the case,
yes.
Where are they held until this investigation happens? Do we let them roam freely in the country? Where are they held without the criticism that they're being held illegally or unlawfully?
In order for them to make a claim of political asylum, they have to go to an immigration official and stake their claim. So even if they cross in a non-port of entry, they still have to go to an immigration official to set out their proof. And if they go through a legal port of entry, there is no mechanism where they can come in legally anyway. That is the misconception that we're operating under. They cannot. Why don't we give them... Go ahead.
There's no misconception there because they can assert credible fear if they go through a port of entry. If they're found to have a credible fear, then they're placed in removal proceedings and they can make an application for asylum. That's exactly what the Trump order says.
But the law says it doesn't matter where, even if they come in from a non-legal port of entry, they still have to go to an immigration officer to make their claim for political asylum. Otherwise, they can never even apply. It doesn't make a difference. This is about nothing.
All that the
political ghost.
But all that the Trump order said was that they couldn't.
Shouldn't it trouble all of us? Excuse me, guys. Shouldn't it trouble us all that a judge, a single federal judge, decides for the entire nation that he's going to just upend the elected president's policies? I think that's got to be a little bit troubling.
He did not upend it. He just said that's the law.
And Governor, that's exactly
I wish we could spend more time. We have to go. I'm so sorry. We'll try to do it better next time. Up next, Laura recently spoke to a UC Berkeley student about how she was being targeted for her Christian beliefs. This after she dared abstain from a vote on LGBTQ rights. Now, this is a can't miss defending the first segment, which is coming up next. Her crime? She simply abstained from a largely symbolic student vote on October 31st because she didn't fully agree with certain clauses inside the pro-LGBTQ bills. As a result, she got labeled homophobic and transphobic, even though she didn't even oppose the final vote. Laura had the opportunity to speak with Isabella earlier. Let's watch.
Take us through these past few weeks. We first want to establish what happened. This is a student government kind of proclamation stating what exactly?
Yes, so the bill, the main bill that I abstained from opposed Trump's proposed reforms to Title IX, and specifically one clause where a person's gender is defined as a person's biological sex. Now, the bill that I abstained from, not only did it say, we support freedom from discrimination and harassment for all individuals, and especially LGBTQ individuals, but at the end, there were clauses that asked me to promote an LGBTQ identity and lifestyle and to promote organizations whose primary purpose is to promote the LGBTQ identity and lifestyle. And I said because of my Christian views and because I represent the Christian community on campus, I cannot fully support this bill.
Okay, so for that, being a Christian and being unapologetic, you were labeled some pretty terrible things. The Daily Californian said the following. Isabella Chow made transphobic and homophobic statements during an ASUC meeting, publicly dismissing the identities of individuals on campus. Chow's language erased and dehumanized individuals, et cetera, et cetera. How do you respond to that? Did you dehumanize people because of your faith?
Yes, I'd actually like to go back to my original statements on the Senate floor on October 31st. And what I said was, one, I think that discrimination and harassment is never, ever okay. But where I cross a line between, where I can protect you as an individual and where I can promote your identity is a very fine line for me to walk, right? And so my response is, I don't see a conflict between being able to accept, love, and validate you as an individual and yet not fully agreeing with how you choose to identify yourself sexually and
now,
how
I
you
get
choose
that.
to promote your sexual lifestyle.
Isabella, it's a simple, I think, understanding here. They're asking you to promote something that is contrary to your fundamental religious beliefs. That is requiring you to worship at the altar of something that you don't believe in. It's as simple as that. And I don't know whether it's a proclamation or what you said on October 30th. It's as simple as that. And my problem with this is happening across the board in American society. If you are you try to be, no one's perfect, we all fall down. But if you try to live your faith and you believe your faith as, I guess, stated in the Bible or whatever you view the Bible to be, and it's contrary to whatever prevailing norm is at this point popular, then you're labeled a hater, homophobic, transphobic, any phobic comes to mind, and they want to shut you down. So that now you are dehumanized. So what they're accusing you of, they are now doing to you, requiring you to resign from your various positions, have no position on campus, and be reviled. And for that, we're supposed to give them like 2 thumbs up? I don't understand how that's diversity today.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been called the F word in person, online, social media, on the Senate floor. And I mean, other slurs that I just don't want to repeat on camera.
Oh, and again, when you say, look, I love all people, but this, just like you don't agree with everything I believe in, I don't agree with everything you believe in, but I love all people. I love, if you call yourself gay, or I love you as a person. Doesn't mean I have to validate everything you do, just like you wouldn't force them to believe in something that they don't believe in. That's the whole freedom of conscience thing, I thought.
Yes, I think where they're coming from is, because we can't understand how you can love us and not accept our sexual identity, therefore we're going to say your words about love and acceptance are completely worthless, and we're just going to take your words about not accepting us and twist that to mean that you are a hater and a bigot.
Right, but it's meant to shut down speech. This is my point. Are you getting any support on campus, Isabella?
I've gotten encouraging prayers from the Christian community. I've gotten encouraging support from, conservative groups on campus. But besides that, students are afraid to speak out, even if they support me, whether that's, in person or on social media.
That's the
point. And so it's hard. Yeah. Yeah.
Everyone's afraid. So if you're in the military and you believe certain things that are not popular today, you can't speak out. If you're in business, heaven forbid you speak out. If you give a donation to a group that they label as haters or horrible or awful, rotten people, then you are afraid. Everybody's afraid. That is not a free society. That is not truly a free society. And I got to say, I don't care what your belief is. If you're Christian, you're atheist, you have a right to speak out and to have your views respected on college campus. Now, the university says that the student government is autonomous. Is that correct? Because don't you guys get money from the university?
That is correct. Our money comes from student fees. As a Senate class, we manage about $1.5 to $2 million in student funding every year.
Okay. Well, I'm making a legal point, which I know Harmeet Dillon is representing you, but that's a connection to the university. So the university can say all they want, that, we believe in free speech for all people. But if one individual's right to free speech is being denied, and if you're being effectively punished for what you believe, I think the university is in a heap of legal trouble, and I think you are incredibly brave because it is not easy, and feminists should be supporting you. All the pro-women, pro-choice people, they should all be supporting you because you're actually speaking your conscience. And Isabella, we really appreciate you coming on tonight, and we'll be following this case very closely. You have a great lawyer, that's for sure.
Thank you so much.
All right, you take care.
Great report by Laura. Well, last night, Laura brought you the outrageous story about Hollywood bigwigs and how they're considering a boycott of the entire state of Georgia, all because Brian Kemp won the governor's race. Up next, actor Antonio Sabato Jr. sounds off on his fellow Tinseltowners. You better stay with us for this one.